Johnny Cash is dead at the age of 71.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash was one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. He sold over 90 million records, making him one of the best-selling artists of all time.
A lot of the songs are from true experiences, a lot are from imaginary tales that I've dreamed up.
He was also a tough guy with a social conscience, performing for prisoners and presidents alike. However, hidden behind his talent was a dark side, and his rebellious streak led to addiction.
I had personal problems and bad habits that took a long time to break.
When you were on the pills, did you think you were a better singer because of them?
No, I thought I was invincible.
On September 12, 2003, the news of Cash's death came as no surprise to those who knew him. May 18, 2003, 12 p.m., Hendersonville Memory Gardens, Tennessee. Johnny Cash has 4 months to live. It has been just 3 days since June Carter, Johnny Cash's wife of 35 years, died of complications from heart surgery. In March 1968, Johnny had married into music royalty. June was the daughter of A.P. Carter and his wife Sarah, the founding members of the Carter family, a traditional folk group that had a massive impact on America. June had been Johnny's rock through some of his darkest times, and some are worried he'll be able to cope without her. Their only son, John Carter, is there to offer his support.
She told me in the hospital, said, "Go to work." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Don't worry about me, go to work." At the funeral, I could almost hear her saying, "Go to work." 3 days after the funeral, everybody said, "You're crazy." 3 days after the funeral, I was in the studio, and I stayed in the studio for 2 weeks.
At 71 years of age, Johnny is having a career resurgence and is once again the most celebrated country singer alive. But everyone around him can see his health is declining rapidly.
Johnny Cash was born in Dyess, Arkansas on February 26, 1932, the fourth of what would become 7 children. For Ray and Carrie Cash, God-fearing cotton farmers, Johnny worked alongside his parents and siblings.
Down in Dyess, Arkansas, in that part of the Delta where I grew up, I did my first singing and learned my first song while out in the field picking and chopping cotton. One of us was always singing while we worked. It helped make the day go just a little bit faster.
It was a grueling way of life, not helped by a violent alcoholic father who would often take his frustrations out on a young Johnny. One thing made it bearable, and that was his older brother Jack, who he idolized. However, a tragic event when Johnny was just 12 years old would change Johnny's life forever.
Splitting logs to make fence posts over with a tabletop saw. The morning he went down there, my mother felt like something was going to happen. He did too, and I did too. And I started begging him to go fishing with me. But we finally walked out, and Mama came out and stood on the steps and watched us go. I've never seen her do that. He started imitating Bugs Bunny. And I said, "I'll see you later, Doc." And he kept going on this way, and I went this way. And he said, "What's up, Doc? What's up, Doc?" And as long as I could see him, he was saying that to me. I got to the river, and it was the worst day for fishing I'd ever come to. And I lay down on the bank and lay there probably 2 hours. I got back to this junction, and my father came up in the preacher's car and told me to jump in, he said, and throw your fishing pole away. And I knew something really bad had happened. And I asked him, and he said, "Jack has been hurt on the table saw, and there's no hope for him." That's a pretty heavy time for me.
He saw heaven as he was dying,
yeah, he did.
and I believe said to your mother, "Can't you see it?" Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Jack was almost cut in half, and it took him a week to die. Johnny's pain was made worse by his father, Ray. After his father would constantly blame Johnny for Jack's death, even going as far as saying, "It should have been you." This was undoubtedly the most life-shaping moment he would ever have.
Johnny found refuge in the radio, listening to country music and gospel songs, giving him interest in writing music.
I didn't call them songs when I was a kid. I called them song poems. It's something I've always done. When I was 18 years old and I saw that I could get out of that cotton country and there was a big world out there, I said, the only picking I'll do after this is guitar.
Johnny's ticket out of town came in the form of military service in Germany. And then at the age of 22, he moved to Memphis to realize his dream of becoming a musician. There, he hooked up with a couple of car mechanics and country music fans and auditioned for Sam Phillips, the visionary owner of Sun Records. The now legendary Sun Records played a major role in the development of rock and roll in the early 60s by kick-starting the career of some of the world's most influential artists, including Elvis Presley, Roy Orbison, and Jerry Lee Lewis. On April Fool's Day 1955, Sam Phillips signed Johnny Cash and his band, the Tennessee Two.
We'd like to do one. It's on one side of our latest Sun release. That we'd like to thank all the wonderful folks to being so good to us about for making it one of the country's top sellers. It's called I Walk the Line.
In 1956, at the age of 24, Johnny had his first major hit, I Walk the Line, which reached #1 on the Billboard charts. Other hits included Folsom Prison Blues, which contained the lyrics, I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. These dark lyrics were a completely new and fresh thing for the country music scene, which gave Johnny a dangerous outlaw image.
Any of the guards are still speaking to me. Could I have a glass of water?
In 1968, Johnny recorded one of his most famous live albums in an audience in front of prison inmates. At Folsom Prison, not only did this improve his tough guy image, but showed him to be a man of the people.
Johnny's tough guy persona was helped by his rough look, and the scar on his cheek only added to this. And rumors went crazy. People started claiming Johnny was in a fight and a guy stabbed him. Some believed that Johnny had been shot in the jaw, but the scar was simply caused by a surgical procedure in 1953 to remove a cyst from his lower cheek. The surgery was simply cosmetical.
May 18, 2003, 4 p.m. Cash Cabin Studio, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Straight after June's funeral, Johnny is back in the recording studio. Johnny is recording with a superstar producer, Rick Rubin, who resurrected his failing career in 1994 with the album American Recordings, which introduced Cash to a whole new generation of fans. However, the recording sessions were not going well, and it was terribly hard.
I never got to have a smoke with A.P. before. Never got to have a smoke with him.
Johnny began smoking when he was just 10 years old, and his breathlessness is the result of lung damage caused by decades of smoking. Smoking was an addiction for Johnny, and no matter what, he'd never stop smoking.
In an interview of Johnny Cash at the Country Music Awards in 1991, the effects of Johnny's smoking were evident.
Well, well, this one is special.
Some have said Johnny was still smoking in his final years, just not seen. But even if this isn't true, it's no lie that Johnny smoked daily for decades. And this undoubtedly affected his lungs and was definitely a factor in his respiratory arrest.
Not only did Johnny smoke, but he developed a taste for another drug.
Johnny had energy like no other man, but when it came to settling down, it was hard to get him back up. John Carter couldn't get his dad up half of the time. He was totally passed out and just totally gone.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
July 5th, 2003, 7:30 p.m. Carter Family Fold, Virginia.
I'm glad to see you folks.
Johnny Cash has 69 days to live. Despite his obvious poor health, Johnny is still performing.
Music was Johnny Cash's life. It was his bread and butter. It was his livelihood.
However, this is the last performance Johnny will ever give.
The spirit of June Carter overshadows me tonight.
You could tell Johnny's voice was going. Especially on the low notes, he was having trouble singing. But he's still impressed with his singing. Despite his weak voice and ill health, he still commands the audience. But he wasn't always a confident performer. Early in Johnny's career, he was taking prescription medications while on tour. Fall 1957, Jacksonville, Florida. A year after releasing his smash hit I Walk the Line, Johnny Cash and his band were on the Florida leg of their US tour. After finishing a show, they would often travel hundreds of miles throughout the night to get to their next gig. This took a hit on Johnny, as he was only sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night. Barely eating and always on the move, he had to find a way to keep himself going. Ahead of shows, it wasn't only exhaustion Johnny struggled with during these times, but he was always so nervous he could barely go out and perform.
Reluctant to face the crowd, Johnny was offered a quick fix by a fellow musician. Somebody said, "Here, take this little pill. It will solve all of your problems." Johnny Cash did not realize what he was getting himself into.
And since Johnny got on this secret sauce, his performances were quite something to watch. He would come out super energetic, showing his full potential. Not only this, but he was also very unpredictable. But driven by its effects, Johnny's intake of this soon escalated.
People take drugs because they make you feel good, you know. But like I pointed out in my book, there is a demon called deception that is like the old wino. He drinks out of the bottle so long, and then the bottle starts drinking out of him. Well, the pills, I took the pills so long, the reversal came without me knowing it when the pills started taken from me.
During the 1960s, amphetamines were available on prescription, but by 1965, Johnny was so greedy for pills that no doctor was prepared to prescribe such huge quantities. Johnny Cash had begun making trips into Mexico to buy industrial quantities of this secret sauce on their black market. Narcotics officers found 688 amphetamine capsules inside Cash's guitar case. The taxi driver had thought he was buying heroin and gave him up to the US border cops. They threw Johnny in jail. As amphetamines were prescription drugs rather than illegal narcotics, Johnny was released on bail the next day.
Cash's arrest in 1965 is very interesting, as he was caught smuggling not just large amounts of amphetamines, but also Equinil tablets, a drug that Johnny would have used to counteract the effects of the amphetamines when he needed to sleep or calm down, which is extremely dangerous, and no one should ever do it. These cause sluggishness and loss of muscle control in Johnny.
Looks like the kingdom is beginning to crumble.
1982, Griffin, Georgia. Along with a successful music career, Johnny had landed a number of acting roles and was starring in the TV movie Murder in Coweta County. He was accompanied by his wife, June, and 12-year-old son, John Carter Cash. The boy often complained that his father was a terrible snorer and he'd hardly get any sleep.
But one night, Johnny stopped breathing altogether. John Carter couldn't get his father up. It was said that Johnny had overdosed on tranquilizers. They quickly rushed him into the shower and poured water on him for a good 5 minutes. Still no sign of Johnny waking up, John Carter was very concerned as he thought his father was dead. After 10 minutes, June had finally revived Johnny.
Nobody truly knows if Johnny Cash was taking these drugs towards the end of his life. However, taking such huge amounts over so many years would have put a massive strain on Johnny's health. But the damage done by Johnny's excessive usage is just the tip of the iceberg of Johnny's downfall. Although it was reported Johnny died from respiratory failure, still, nobody truly knows what really caused his early death. But now you've seen his struggles with smoking and prescription drugs. The question is, what else did Johnny struggle with, potentially causing his death?
Him and my doctor said, you need to have arteriogram, angiogram, and so I did. I said, don't you find anything, because I'm going to Jamaica on vacation. Well, after they did that on me, he came back into the room and he said, now who do I call to cancel your reservations to Jamaica? I said, that bad, huh? He said, that bad.
In 1988, at the age of 56, Johnny had a double coronary bypass surgery. Since taking his first amphetamine pill in 1957, his heart had taken a pounding from elevated heart rate and high blood pressure. When you add that to his enormous damage caused by 45 years of smoking, Johnny's vascular system would be destroyed.
December 1988, Baptist Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee. For most, a dangerous procedure like a coronary bypass would have been a major wake-up call. But when Johnny's surgeon gave a press conference, he claimed that half an hour before the surgery, Johnny snuck out of the hospital for a smoke. July 8, 2003, 8:30 p.m., Cash Family Ranch, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Johnny has 67 days to live. After his performance playing at the Carter family fold, Johnny's daughter Cindy brings him home. Since June passed away, Johnny is becoming less mobile and his eyesight is failing.
Johnny was suffering from a condition that's associated with eye problems, and that's diabetes. Johnny was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in his 50s, the worst type that you'd never want. But people who smoke have double the risk of developing diabetes. But that's not the only thing that caused it.
Johnny Cash's diet was something familiar with those down south.
Once Johnny's sister claimed that he would frequently sip on chocolate syrup. Straight from the bottle, he would drink a whole bottle of it. and one of his favorite snacks was cheddar cheese dipped in brown sugar. After Cash would get out of surgery, his first meal was always fried chicken or meatloaf. A day without junk food was a sad day for Johnny Cash.
October 25th, 1997, Flint, Michigan. By the late 1990s, it was clear that Johnny's health was going downhill real fast. 9 years after his heart surgery, Johnny was halfway through a show when he suddenly became dizzy and disoriented.
Johnny had dropped his guitar pick and was unable to pick it up. He leaned over in front of 6,000 people in the audience, with his hand shaking terribly. Finally, the outlaw would crash to the floor. But he eventually made his way up with help and got the guitar pick, but he began to stagger his words. Thinking he was drunk, the audience started to heckle him, and Johnny hit back with a surprising announcement. Johnny Cash would announce to the crowd of 6,000 people and said, "Folks, I'm in bad shape. I've got Parkinson's disease." And the audience was gasping in unbelief.
The world had officially heard. The man in black has Parkinson's disease, with it being widely reported over every news station, every magazine, and everywhere in the world.
This was all until Cash's doctors would quickly abandon his Parkinson's diagnosis and diagnose him with autonomic neuropathy, due to Johnny's bad symptoms of muscle weakness and tremors until the end of his life. Diabetes is the most common cause of autonomic neuropathy, and this could be the reason for what caused Johnny Cash's death.
And not surprising at all, Johnny Cash suffered with another illness.
I was getting pneumonia.
Pneumonia. Johnny suffered with this his entire life. Looking back at his military records, it was said that Johnny was hospitalized with pneumonia at the age of 15 years old, and this was linked to growing up in rural Arkansas.
Dyess, Arkansas was located in what is known as the Dust Bowl, an area affected by severe dust storms caused by drought during the 1930s and 40s. Enormous amounts of dust in the air caused dust pneumonia in large portions of the population, and many died. It's likely that Johnny's pneumonia was caused by this.
Towards the last few years of Johnny Cash's life, he would be in the hospital every couple months with pneumonia being the reason. Whether it was 10 days or 30 days, and not in good health at all, continuing his bad habits.
July 8th, 2003, Cash Family Ranch, Hendersonville, Tennessee. 66 days before his death. The day after Cash's last public performance, Phil Maffetone arrived to assess Johnny for some physical therapy.
Cash told Maffetone that he couldn't feel his toes or fingers, his balance is off, and occasionally slurs his words. Maffetone puts Johnny on a brand new diet and exercise regime and quickly notices improvements. Despite making good progress, Johnny's health was about to take another major blow.
I take care of myself. I take exercise. I work out. I walk and I swim, and I have a garden. I work outside. I love the outdoors. I get plenty of exercise. As far as I know, I'm in perfect health.
September 5th, 2003, Baptist Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee. Johnny has 1 week to live. He's back in the hospital, this time with severe heartburn, caused by his lifetime smoking and consuming fatty foods. September 11th, 2003, 2 p.m. Cash Family Ranch, Tennessee. Johnny Cash has 12 hours to live. After spending 2 weeks in the hospital, Johnny had returned home and continues working on his mobility and movement with his physical therapist, Phil. However, all their work has been undone.
When his physical therapist, Phil, would enter the house, he found a slumped-over Johnny in his chair, not much different from the very first time he saw him.
Phil Maffetone tries to get Johnny to stand, but it's no use. He looks right into Phil's eyes, and he says to Phil, "It's time." 4:45 p.m. Johnny's health plummets and an ambulance is called. He was in respiratory distress. His gut had shut down.
Phil Maffetone said that as they carried Johnny away, he stared him right in the eyes. He knew what was happening, Phil claimed. Phil told Johnny, "Goodbye, friend."
September 12th, 2003, 1:45 a.m. Baptist Hospital, Nashville. Members of Johnny Cash's family rushed to be at his bedside, including his younger sister, Joanne. At 2 a.m., Johnny Cash is declared officially dead.
Johnny Cash is dead at the age of 71.
Oh, I expect my life to end pretty soon. You know, I'm 71 years old. And I have great faith, though. I have unshakable faith. I've never been angry with God. I've never been I've never turned my back on God, so to speak. I never thought that God wasn't there.
Where do you think we go afterwards?
Where do we go? When we die, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, we all hope to go to heaven.
On Monday, September 15th, 2003, more than 1,000 family and friends attended Johnny Cash's funeral. At the First Baptist Church near Hendersonville, Johnny was laid to rest next to his wife of 35 years, June Carter. Some believe Johnny died from a broken heart, but the true cause of Johnny's death may be because just 2 months before his death, he was on over 30 prescriptions of drugs claimed by his physical therapist, Phil Maffetone.
2 months before his death, Phil called Johnny's doctor, requesting a list of his prescriptions, and was told Johnny was on over 30 different ones. And one of those so happened to be Thorazine, although Johnny was not psychotic. And his doctor claimed it was because Johnny would get the hiccups often.
Polypharmacy is something you define when someone is taking over 5 prescription drugs at once, and Johnny was on 30 at the end of his life. Using over 5 or more at the same time could be a guaranteed interaction with each other, causing extreme harm.
Johnny Cash had extremely weak kidneys, as he had suffered for 20 years. Taking that many prescription drugs can be extremely toxic for the kidneys, eventually causing them to fail. Nobody knows how long Johnny was on these 30 prescriptions. But if you take into account his years of previous usage when he was younger, it's no surprise his kidneys were destroyed.
Although the drugs were no matter what a factor in his death, this still isn't the full story. When he was being taken to the hospital for the last time, Maffetone claimed that Johnny's gut had shut down. Has everyone wondered why both his stomach and lungs failed?
In 1983, Johnny Cash was admitted to the hospital with a bad stomach ulcer. He underwent surgery to have the ulcer removed. Johnny himself knew that his ulcer was the result of pill usage.
We know that he was on 30 medications at the time of his death, and it is very possible that it could have caused another stomach ulcer. But looking back at witness statements, there are reports that after June died, Johnny Cash had to sleep vertically propped up by pillows to avoid having heartburn or acid reflux. The true cause of Johnny Cash's death could now be revealed. Johnny had autonomic neuropathy, which is a result of nerve damage caused by his diabetes, which affected his stomach that was unable to regulate the amount of gastric acid. Over time, acid built up in his stomach until it was ejected back into his esophagus and into his trachea. At this point, the acid seeped into his throat and lungs, causing enormous damage. Johnny's lifelong pneumonia and almost 6 decades of smoking had already seriously compromised his lungs. The little bit of healthy lung tissue that was left was compromised by the acid, leading to his respiratory failure and death. It's undeniable that Johnny's reckless and uncaring attitude to his health caused his death. But Johnny lived up to his tough outlaw image. He made his own rules and lived the life he wanted. Despite putting his body through everything he did, he reached the age of 71. This shows exactly how much of a fighter Johnny Cash was and what the human body can do.
Never, 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 never give up.
Rest in peace, Johnny Cash. Check out this video here.